With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome to Heard Tell. Okay, this is part 2 of our conversation with Ben Harris on America's 250th. We've recorded this on the 4th of July. He joined us live from jolly old England to discuss the traitorous colonies. Our countries have a lot in common. We have a lot of important differences to learn from. We have some very common problems, and we have some very different ways of dealing with those. And all of those things are worth talking about. If you missed part 1, however you're listening to this, whether it's on the podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, whatever the case may be, or YouTube, make sure you go back and listen to part 1. But this is part 2, and we're going to finish up our conversation on America, England, freedom, wide-ranging conversation here, touch on a whole lot of things. And I think it's really good stuff. We appreciate it, Ben, for the 4th of July. If you want to read the piece that we're referencing that he wrote, I have cross-posted it on my Substack. It is on his Substack. Pop in Ben Harris. It'll come right up. It's also up at ordinary-times.com. We'd appreciate a read there. So, without further ado, part 2 of our conversation on America's 250th anniversary of independence with the great Ben Harris, live from the UK, right here on Heard Tell. Yeah, you were writing about this with your piece on America, so that we don't get too far chasing too many chickens here. That's an American term for you English folks. We also chase rabbits. My father always said, well, you're chasing the rabbit. You need to come back now. When you talk about individual freedom, I remember the first time I did major UK media, a media hit. I think it was Times Radio. Yeah, it was the first time I did Times Radio. Really big outlet, important outlet, good outlet. I listen to them all the time. They do really good work. They sent me a 2-page disclaimer that I had to sign and send back to them before I could get on the air.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you do this for everybody? They're like, no, just our Americans. Like, literally, I've got the email. I kept it. They're like, no, we just do this with Americans the first time because they don't know any better. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know any better? I have been on Progressive. I've been on Young Turks multiple times. I've been on network TV. I've been on small podcasts. I've been on regional radio. I've done everything in America. I swear the truth. I have never once been told what to say or what not to say on air on an American platform. I've never been told what to write. Some of that's because I know better than to go to certain places, but I've never been told what to write, what I couldn't do. I'm not talking about editing. I mean, like my opinion. I've never been told once not to do anything other than, don't curse on air because obviously you don't want to catch an FCC fine. They sent me this 2-page thing of things that you can and can't say. And they're like, no, we only do this for Americans because they don't know any better. That's literally what I got told. And it was stuff like, you don't think about it, but like the example, because we were talking about a court case, they said you cannot say somebody committed a crime unless they've actually been convicted of the crime in the UK because their libel laws are so different.
Yeah.
So like they literally lay it out point by point, like, if he is on trial, he has been accused. Even if you know they did it, you cannot say they committed the crime until they are convicted of the crime. And then you still can't say it. You can only say they've been convicted of the crime. Like it was this whole thing that it was like an example they walk you through of what you can and can't say because they don't have freedom of speech. It's pretty lenient, but they have very, very, they don't have the press freedoms where I can say pretty much everything. One, if you try to sue me, as long as I don't run out of money, I'm going to win probably, unless they can prove I slandered you. And it's not like that in the UK.
No.
And then politically, their example, I'll never forget this. Their example was somebody in Parliament saying something. Somebody that stood up in Parliament and tells a bald-faced lie in the House of Commons. I cannot go on TV and say they lied. Like I literally can't say they lied. You can't. And I was like, that ain't true. So I went and looked, and sure, you cannot call somebody a liar on TV in the UK.
Yeah.
And it just blew my mind because, like, I can sit here and say Donald Trump's a liar, Barack Obama's a liar. I can say it till I'm blue in my face. They literally say if they stand up in the house and they say that, you can't say it even if you know it's true.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. But I don't think people in America, like, it made me appreciate, number one, And number two is like, it's such a subtle difference on paper, but in practice, that is a chasm when it comes to freedom of speech.
Well, I would take them saying Americans don't know any better. I would take that as a big compliment because, and this is something
I should have printed it and put it on the wall. I love
this.
It.
Is something
we don't know any better.
I love.
Darn freedom people.
The First Amendment is an absolutely wonderful thing, and this idea of protecting speech, even if you don't agree with it, is something that's always been very important to me. It's. As I said in the article, we don't really, free speech protections generally in America are so much stronger. And it's this idea that, it's there in the First Amendment. You can't get around it. That's one of the reasons why Trump has come up against so many problems with the courts, because he keeps trying to get around it, because his instinct is not for that. But it's, over here, there's lots of there's a lot of social media problems. Someone will say something on social media, it's not a crime, but then the police have what's called non-crime hate incidents, and it's like, well, if that's not a crime, then why are you even getting involved in it? And it's like, how do we get to this stage in the first place? Like, I understand there's got to be some sort of protections for defamation, I suppose, but it's this is something America, in my opinion, definitely does a lot better in the US. America definitely does a lot better than the UK. When it comes to the way you treat speech and the way you treat those sorts of things.
It's self-defeating, because now you have the thing where you're having these incidences and they're becoming viral video for different groups with violence, and then you have the police actively trying to get people to just take down the social media, and that just feeds into the bad faith actors even worse. So the lack of freedom actually feeds into it, and you make the problem 10 times worse by not having the freedom. And because the viral lie goes around so fast, and then the second stage of that story is not, well, here's what actually happened. It's the police are trying to keep you from seeing the truth. So now it's not even the first second. Now, whatever the actual truth of what happens is like the third or fourth cycle down the road, and it's got no chance. And it's just the not having ugly freedom is always better than curated tyranny, because the more you try to curate it, the worse you're going to make it, and the more pushback you're going to get. And I think, and I'm watching this with our UK friends right now on the immigration stuff, the violence in the street stuff, the migrant stuff, really, really ugly stuff that's happening, and stuff that needs an honest, sober answer, both law enforcement and legal and moral answers to a lot of this stuff. But you're not going to get there because you're stuck in this argument about whether or not people can see the video. That's a bad place to be, my friend. That's a really bad place to be as a culture and a society.
Well, we're quite a nannying country, and I've said this in my article. I said, we tend to be very, the nanny state here is very strong, and often it's at the behest of people themselves. There was an infamous sort of poll done just after COVID, and it was like, what COVID restrictions would you like to see permanently? And I think 1 in 5 people wanted to shut nightclubs and bars permanently after COVID. And it's like, how's personal choice? This was after COVID. They weren't saying shut it during COVID. They were saying shut it for good. And it's just, for some reason, I don't know what it is. Maybe there's probably some historical reason for it, which I'm not smart enough to grasp. But there's obviously something in the British psyche which just loves having the government tell you what to do. They love having the government banning stuff. They love having the government bossing you around. And I've always, I get there's benefits to that. There's some benefits to that, because the US is almost like, well, you're free, but you're free to be poor. You're free to you sort of have less of a safety net. But that appeals to me personally. I get why it doesn't appeal to some people, but this to me is what I like about America, is that you do have, the government is, if not, totally off your back, it's moving at a lot slower pace than it is here, because here we just ban stuff left, right, and center all the time.
See, that's a perspective thing that Americans, I think, take for granted, is when you're overseas or you live in another country. I lived in Germany twice for about 5 years altogether, 2 different times. By the way, 2 very different eras, because the first time was under the Schroeder era, where there was a lot of anti-American sentiment not from the people, but from the government. That was when Iraq, and we now know, Schroeder was on the Gazprom. He was corrupt with the Russians. He was saying really ugly stuff about Americans, and it was uncomfortable for some. Not from the average people were great to us. It wasn't that, but politically it wasn't fun. So most Americans, I've said this, one downfall of Americans as a people, you need to go somewhere where you don't speak the language and try to navigate it. And you need to be somewhere where the news item is how your country's bad. And you're like, wait a minute, I got to live here every day, and you're getting bashed. So now when I sit here and analyze the news and we're talking about immigration or some of these other issues, it's like, okay, I maybe know 1% of what that maybe feels like, because I had that experience of living in a foreign country where the leader of that country is absolutely bashing you as a horrible human being just because of where you're from. You know, you've been through that at a very, very small level, not like what some people have been just absolutely persecuted. Americans don't travel as much as they probably should, and they don't get that world perspective. So when you say that, it's something I just don't think Americans understand how good we have it, because we take it for granted and we think, well, this is an oppression of our freedom, and it is, but it's on this level. But because we don't have a perspective on it, we don't understand the rest of the world's already up here on the oppression level. And I don't know how to explain it to people, because it really does have to be experienced. You have to be somewhere else where you're not as free as you are daily before you ever even think about it.
I think
because you're just so used to it.
I think
it's a fish and water kind of thing, right?
Yeah, but I think it's also a mindset. I think a lot of people in other countries outside the US, they view government as the main government's job is to protect, actively protect people. Whereas Americans, it seems to be more like the government's job, and this is my view too, is to sort of protect basic things, but let you figure out yourself. It's more big on self-reliance, and I think it's just a matter of perspective. And I totally do get that. Some people, they prefer the other what we have here, but this is the American sort of view on government is quite unique. Most countries do not have that. It's very much a group saying, government, help us, save us. They want the government to step down, to come down, and sort things out for them. And Americans are not quite as into that, it seems.
You talked about in your piece, and again, it's in the chat link. It's also up on ordinary-times.com. You started talking about it, and I want to pull the quote because I want to make sure I say this right. And you put it this way. You said there's a deeper, more intangible element to Americans' relationship with freedom due to no small part of their history as a nation which rebelled. Americans tend to be much warier of government intervention in their daily lives and less hostile to the concept of personal wealth. I believe that's true. I think it's still true by the majority. I also think that's the edges that are getting worn down right now in our political system, and why we're seeing so much problems. Because the edge of that gets worn down is not, we pose it as capitalism versus socialism, but that's not really what it is. The edge of that's getting worn down is unaccountable government and corruption. I think that's where that's getting chewed up, and that's the beef I have with the Trump administration. That's the beef I've had with other administrations, like the Clinton administration, that had a lot of corruption involved in it. We're going to have more corrupt government coming up because now it's more ingrained. I think the leading edge of losing what you just said made us special isn't really political or ideology. I think it's good old-fashioned laziness, greed, not holding our government accountable. And I think the corruption is going to tear us apart way before the politics ever get to it. But we just want to talk about the politics because that's easier than dealing with the corruption. Yeah.
Well, the irony is, of course, that American Trump and sort of the MAGA movement, they often talk about, the third world and importing the third world. They say, we don't want these immigrants here because they bring the third world with them. But the irony is that the Trump and his sort of cronies are so third worldist in the way they have this corruption. It's someone from afar, I can see this is not American at all. Like this idea of using the government to sort of divvy out things to your friends and allies, that is not really an American thing. That's very much a third world thing. And it's kind of ironic that they're supposed to be this vanguard of American values, and actually they're, if anything, the Trump administration is the one that's importing this sort of stuff. They want to bring this into America, and it's like, why do you want to do that? Because I've seen people on the right, sort of more intellectual types, who say, well, the government should be used to punish our enemies, etc., and reward our allies, and that's just not what government should be about. I don't want to see left or right governments do it. It doesn't matter if my side's in power. I don't want my side to be acting like this. It's just wrong.
But that's the thing, is it's gimme, gimme, gimme now. And then they want to play the victims when it flips the other way, and the other people do the exact same thing that you just set them up for. I got so frustrated. going back to the Supreme Court decisions of the past week, I got so frustrated with the cover, and maybe it's because I'm a writer and an editor, and I think, I have this problem when I read something now. I think of the form factor of it before I think of the actual content of it. I got so sick of, I'm talking big name. I don't want to pick on, like, New York Times, Washington Post, like all the big publications are like, Supreme Court gives Trump the power. No, they didn't.
Yeah.
They gave the president power. The next president isn't going to give that power back, whether it's, President generic Democrat or President generic Republican or whoever the next they didn't give President Trump. I'm so tired of this coverage, and I understand why you do it, and it's SEO, and it's making sure it clicks through, and I get all that. And Trump's the best thing to ever happen to the news media business in my lifetime, by far. You got to get Trump in the headline. I get it. The Supreme Court did not rule for or against Trump. They're ruling for or against executive power. So the executive power got some really big wins this week, and the executive power got some really key, in my opinion, very important losses this week. They should have all been losses, but that, we'll rehash that some other time. We have this absolute navel-gazing tendency in politics and media right now where it's just all immediate and we don't think long-term at all.
Yeah.
And we don't understand, like, do you realize, like, we're well into Donald Trump's lame duck era. Like, really, after the midterms, it'll be really apparent because it's going to be ugly for the Republicans, I think. Although I never discount our Democratic friends' ability to blow an easy election, but they should be able to do really well here. But, Trump is so temporary, man. And some of this is, I never believed my dad. He's just like, look, there's no substitute for experience. That was always his line. It's like, and he was a teacher. He's an educator for his whole career. He's like, I can teach you whatever. I can teach you anything but experience. There's no substitute for experience. Maybe it's just getting older and having the experience of how temporary this stuff is. Because I'm on my 7th, 8th president, whatever it is. I mean, Carter when I was born, but I was a baby. So really Reagan, the 2 Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and then Trump and Biden. That's been my lifetime. And really, Clinton was the first election I really paid attention to. That's the first election I voted in. It was the 98 midterm, which was the impeachment. It's like, I heard all these same arguments during the Clinton administration when they did the impeachment there. It's just, reversed roles. Yeah. And the people that said we have to have Clinton in power because he's such a good liar. There's people on national television going, he lies so well, we just got to admire how well he lies. That happened on the Talking Head shows. I sat there and watched it. And the corruption and the bad stuff was swept under the rug because he was a Democrat. And then one of his best friends for years and years, the Clintons and Trump were always friends until politics got involved. Guess what we're doing? Well, we got to have the corruption because look what he's doing for all of us. Yeah, under the table, money-wise. Like, it's the same crap. And it's just my side, your side. And Trump's just taking it to a biblical level. We just got the data this week where he's made, $2 billion just in this term already. Just got him and his family. Let me be specific. Yeah. It's corruption it's corruption so vast that people can't even see it because it's so big in front of them. They don't know what they're looking at.
People don't care. People just, it's all about their side. They want their side to get a win. It's like, as I said, it's like a football game.
What are you winning? That's it. I had this conversation with somebody who's been 50 years. We disagree politically. I said, what are you winning by hitching your star to this politician? I'll leave the politician unnamed. Because it doesn't matter. It's interchangeable. Like, what are you winning by, like, they're our employees. Don't fall in love with your politicians. Fall in like, because at some point you're going to need to jettison them because they're employees. Mm. I don't work for Trump. Trump works for me. I'm a citizen of this country. He's not my king. He's not my Christ. He's an employee. But I got these people on social media that are like, no, you got to do what the president says. The hell I do. What kind of American are you?
And what did you get out of it? You're absolutely right. At least when Villa won the Europa League, for example. Sorry to bring it back to Villa, but when we won the Europa League, I get that personal satisfaction of we've won something. Here's my Villa shirt with winners 26 on the back, champions 26. What do you get when your politician, wins some sort of political battle? You get nothing. It's just and the people that you're celebrating with, they'll stab you in the back over something else anyway. At least with a sports team, we'll be together and you'll be as one, for the long haul. But in politics, everyone stabbed each other in the back. I've seen it so many times. People are allies one second and then they're bitter enemies the next. And it's just, well, why do you want to live in that sort of environment? I've worked in politics, and I just don't get it.
Well, talk about that for a second, because you just saw this happen. I don't want to get into the weeds on reform, because we're going to have to deal with that. Look, that's going to be the story all next year when we do the general election. So I don't want to get too into the weeds on. I don't want to shoot all our wad on reform right now. But you literally stood there and watched people, to beat the metaphor to death. You just watched people switch sides of the hallway when reform came to power last year. Mm. Like, you were there. You stood there and watched people like, I'm a Tory. Okay, now I'm going to be reform because that's the new hotness. And you just watched them run back and forth. You stood there and watched that happen. Like, you're not just saying that. You watched it in real time recently.
Yeah.
Talk about that for folks, because they saw the Twitter announcements and the people like, I am now standing with Reform UK. Like, they see all that. You're in the hallways when that happened. You talk to the staffers because you were one, and talk about it from behind the scenes of like when people switch sides and it's just blatantly, not that they don't have any standards whatsoever, but so many of them it's just blatant opportunism. Talk about it from being inside government and watching that happen in real time.
Well, when I was in a couple of years ago, I think people switching then, it was more sort of, I'm doing it for ideological reasons, which I can sort of understand. But since the election, when it became clear that, Reform were on the up and the Tories were on the down, you have seen it, MPs or former MPs who have, former Tory MPs who lost their seats in the last election. You see them defect to Reform, and it's so obvious why they're doing it. They're doing it because they want that safe seat. They view Reform as being the next thing to hitch their wagon to. And it's just a bit, it's a bit transparent what they're doing. And I know I've got a couple of friends who did defect to Reform for ideological reasons, and I get that. But it does sort of feel a bit shallow. They're doing it because they want to be on the winning team. It's not because they won't actually care about what happens.
Do you think? Again, I don't want to go too into weeds on reform, because that's all we're going to talk about for the next 2-3 years in UK politics, I'm afraid. Did it surprise you, this latest polling, a little bit with the Burnhams? We've talked about this before, but I just want to ask you, since we're on topic. There is this thing. Do you think reform peaked a little too early?
Possibly. I do think so. I mean, I think the ironic thing is that reform are being subjected to the same pressures that the Tories were. So, so reform have restored.
Well, not to interrupt you, but that's their own fault, because I think they made a tactical thing where it wasn't we oppose the Tories. They openly ran on, we're going to replace the Tories.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they kind of set themselves up for. I know they didn't get covered that way in the West, in American media especially, but that they didn't say we're going to run against them. They said we're going to replace them. So you kind of put that jacket on yourself, did you not?
Yeah, but then of course they're getting done by Restore, who were started by a former Reform MP, and the same thing happening. So basically, the 2024 election, dozens of MPs, Tory MPs, including my own then boss, lost their seats because of Reform standing and splitting the vote. That is now happening to Reform. For example, in the Makerfield by-election that Burnham won, I think he would have won anyway, but it's the same thing happening. Restore are sort of standing as the real voice of the right, and Reform are now complaining, just like we were, about them splitting the vote. So it's kind of ironic this is happening. I don't know. I think momentum's a funny thing, and I think a lot of it depends on how the Tories do and how Burnham does. And I'm not hopeful on Burnham. I don't see him as fundamentally different to Starmer. He's just Starmer, but with North added in, this whole Northern thing. But we'll wait and see.
I'm glad you brought that up. Let me ask you one more thing on this topic, and I want to come back to America for a minute while we still have time. But because it is the 4th of July, and we want to celebrate, us taking belt ass to you twice. I love you. I'm teasing. The Burnham, I'm going to spend half my time in Manchester, King of the North stuff. And I love Sky News. I love you guys, but quit slathering this guy. I know he's going to be better for ratings than Starmer because he's better on TV, so he's better for ratings. But Sky News needs to calm down. They're way too excited about Burnham. BBC's even worse. I'm going to split time. It's going to be Downing Street, number 10 North. I'm King of the North, which, to be fair, it's not him saying the King of the North part, but he's talking Downing Street North. I'm going to make the Chancellor work out of Manchester. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay, Starmer was elected to be the steady non-chaos guy and then got swallowed up by steady chaos immediately. if you're going to start out with a gimmick, which is what this is, it's a gimmick. If you're going to open up with your first big thing being a gimmick, I don't see how this doesn't automatically blow up in his face right off the bat just from it being a gimmick, because you number one, it's just not going to work. Number two is you're going to tick everybody off because all you did was expand government for no good reason, make everything 10 times harder to do just to make a constituency that you already dominate happy. And I know they think they're going to scale that up to the rest of the Midlands and the North and everywhere else, but I think there was some Manchester-specific stuff that makes him popular that I don't know translates to all those old Tory seats that went Labour and then went back to Reform and now restores the problem. I think if you open with a gimmick is a strategic error, because if you open with a gimmick and the gimmick we already know is probably not going to work, I don't see where he does any better than Starmer in the next 18 months just based off that, if nothing else. That's before you get to the structural problems.
No, I agree. In my opinion, he will be as unpopular as Starmer within 9 months. I think if you come in even sooner, if you come in and you've got all these problems and people, I think a lot of people don't realise necessarily what the cause of problems are, but they can certainly see, everything's getting expensive and, nothing works. There aren't any jobs. People are having these big problems. And if you come in and your response to that is, well, there's been no out north. I don't really see. It's all downhill from here. I really do think that. I don't really see what you're trying to achieve with that.
If you're going to be king of the North, the house motto for the king of the North and the Starks was "Winter is coming," and you just talked about it. Winter killed the labor movement dead.
Yeah,
like without exaggeration, they didn't survive the first winter.
Yeah.
How are they going to survive the first winter with the energy crisis they got going on? The EU's not going to throw him a lifeline anytime soon. They're that's going to take some time. I don't see how they survive the winter.
No, I agree completely.
Because those energy prices, and I mean, it's going to be the same problem again this year, right?
He's not willing to tackle them. So if all you've got is gimmicks, then nothing's going to change. So, I mean, maybe it'll surprise us. Maybe it'll surprise us, but I am not hopeful. I'm willing to give him a chance, and if he does, do these reforms, I will hold my hand up and say, "Fair play, Andy Burnham. That's what we need," but I just can't see it. I'm cynical. I
mean, just to play devil's advocate, I could see a path where he just doesn't do anything incredibly stupid. It stabilizes a little bit.
Yeah.
And then Reform, Restore, and the Tories all tear themselves to shreds and they squeak through or at least get a coalition type government or something of that. I could see that happening. But I just don't like starting on a gimmick, because I think that defeats the entire point of let's just stabilize everything first and then see what we can get out of it, which should be the theory of it. Because of what I just said, Reform and Restore and the Tories are all going to be fighting for the same piece of pie. Why don't you want to be kind of the steady, we're going to stand over here and run the government while that's all happening? Then you got an argument.
Yeah.
And you start with a gimmick, it's going to be, oh no, more chaos. And then your chaos doesn't look any different than this chaos over here, just electorally. I don't think that's going to work.
It won't. I'll tell you now, it won't. As I said, it will be, there's an argument you made that maybe Starmer should have just, if you're Labour, Starmer should have just stayed on, taken more of the hits, and then, have Labour peaked, have Labour gone too early by bringing Burnham in. I don't know. They could well have done.
All right, back to America, because it's 4th of July. And I love this piece. I've already put it out on my social media. I'll keep pumping it up. I know we joke about it, but there still is the special relationship between the UK and England, especially in America. We know the Scot-Irish tradition, especially places where I'm from. I'm a Donaldson, so the Scot-Irish tradition is very much my family history. The Welsh coal miner stuff from West Virginia, that's a strong thing. Our pepperoni roll came from your hand pie. We can talk about that. There's all those ties that will always bind one way or the other. But for you personally, you can talk about the big ticket freedom stuff, but personally, when you start talking freedom in America, just talk about what that means to you and why it's so different, because you talked about it. I talked about when I went to Europe, it feels different. When you come here, it felt different to you.
Yeah, it did. And it was, I know it's a silly thing, but like, just for example, that you go into a bar and they serve plastic straws, because in here, plastic straws are de facto banned. And it's
one thing Trump did that I was all for. I'm like, yep, that's good Trump. I like that. Let's get
rid of it. If businesses want to not use plastic, then fair play to them, fine. But to me, my issue is this idea of the government dictating it. And that's the problem. And that's what I think you have less of in America, because you've got this decentralized, federalized system, because you've got this sort of culture of less government intervention. It's just different, and it just feels a bit more. It's funny. Just going back briefly to Starmer. When Starmer came to power, he said that he was going to bring a government that treaded more lightly on people's lives, and he did the exact opposite. And that's what I like about the US, is that the government does tread a bit more lightly on your lives in general. And this is what freedom means to me, and this is what America's always stood for. And I'm not claiming that America is better in every regard. It's just what I personally prefer, and I think it's preference at the end of the day.
There's a media term called headroom. I think America, you just have more headroom for success.
Yeah,
and
I think you've got more. You've got. You can fall further as well. I think you can fall further. There's less of a net there. There's also more of potential.
It's funny because, we were talking about the stat with some friends the other day about how, and I think the Trump administration even brought up how the UK per capita GDP is on trend with Mississippi, our poorest state. And it's not a fair comparison, because once you do import export and the full trappings of a country, it's not exactly completely fair. But yeah, one on one, Americans are wealthier than the rest of the world, and it's not particularly close for the most part. And it's to the extent where they don't realize it. They really don't.
And the gap's grown as well. The gap's grown in the last 20 years.
The gap is and I know people are going to start screaming about the billionaires and all that. Like, yeah, but there's a drag effect to that too, because you don't, you never worked for a company ran by the guy on minimum wage. Your company's run by the millionaires and billionaires. They hire people. That's how it works. Not that we shouldn't be taxing them and all. That's I don't want to go down that road. They need to pay their fair share too, but you can't tax them unless you have a coherent tax code. So that's a cart before the horse argument. You put it directly in your piece. I thought it was funny. You brought up the Yeltsin in the supermarket picture, which is really funny. Again, living in Germany, being in the UK, the markets are pretty good. I notice a difference. There is less variety. There is less stuff. Even a mega thing like a Walmart or an Aldi. We got Aldi now. Everybody loves Aldi here, which is a German brand, Lidl. But little things like the marketplace macro, the market, and then the marketplace micro, where you actually go and do consumer goods, you can tell a big difference if you look really close. And it is just as simple as the way a grocery store is set up in England or Germany or the EU compared to the US, and the logistics of how they get it and the way they do it. I remember my landlord in Germany ran a company that was it'd be like it's like a self home improvement store. Like, they sold the home improvement, but they also sent out the work crews to do the work on top of it. So he had like a trucking company and a building company and a store all wrapped into one business. And I was actually renting his childhood home, because generational homes much more common in Germany. So I remember going to his business, and he was explaining how his business was set up, because I had to go pay my rent. And he was explaining how he paid his drivers and how he paid his stores. And we got into really deep, and I have a, transportation background professionally. We got really deep into the differences. And I was just like, man, the logistics in America are just, you can't even explain how much better the logistics and transportation in America is compared to Europe. Like, it's not even close. Like, it's just night and day, the transportation difference. Things like that drive an economy, and we don't ever talk about it, but you see it when you go to the market. And those are the freedoms that I think America takes for granted. That's the secret sauce to our economy that I think Americans take for granted, but you don't see it until you go to a store in another country and go, well, how come they only have this, this, and this, and they don't have, why don't I have 4 different kinds of oranges to choose from? It's like, well, because you don't have the logistics.
Well, I think a lot of discontent comes from social media to an extent, because it's like people are seeing social media, they're seeing people who are doing better than them. But what a lot of Americans don't seem to realize probably is that, people from outside looking in, and we're saying, well, look at how well Americans are doing compared to us. So it's the same sort of thing. And it's just, I love the World Cup, but the World Cup as a showcase sort of, there's lots of people, Europeans going to America and saying, actually, I thought America was really bad, but actually I really like it here. It's nice to see that. It's nice to see people get a taste of what I've got a taste of. Look, as I said, America's not perfect, and you do some things which I think are silly, and there are some things which I just don't. We do better, but it's just a preference, and I can see why people like that lifestyle, and
Except our Scottish friends who figured out that our beer is only 0.5 instead of 11.
Oh, I didn't drink, so that doesn't bother me.
Well, I don't drink anymore either, but I just found it funny. They had this guy. He's like, man, I got to drink. They're like, they're giving us a bad name. We have to drink 3 times as much to get the same alcohol because your beer sucks. It's like, okay, fair point. Oh gosh, but no, I want to bring up too, because this is also in your piece. Again, it's linked in the chat. Go read it. It's a fantastic piece. We talked about American exceptionalism. I want to talk about one more of those jingless things as kind of a way to round this up, because I could talk to you all day, my friend. And we haven't even got to baseball yet. You talk about the American dream, but you talked about it personally as I come here and I dream about it, and then it kind of fades, and then I come back and it comes roaring back. And you talked about, your recent trip to Boston, which, is just all kinds of American history. And, a lot of the founding stuff of America comes out of Boston. It's just one of those seminal places. So obviously why that would be there, our national anthem's about Boston, for crying out loud. Talk about that for a minute, because it becomes a jingle, just the American dream, kind of like American exceptionalism we opened with. But talk about that American dream thing, because there are people around the world that still has American dream. We're just saying America really does mean that to them. It's just a byword for potential and possibilities, and it really is a dreamland. It is their never land, just saying the word America, to ever get just visit here, let alone live here or become an American. Talk about that for a minute, because I think it's striking that halfway through your piece, you grabbed on American dream, but you made it personal.
Well, it's interesting because I've been to quite a few states in America now. I've not seen as much of America as I would like to at this point. There's still many places I need to see. Funny enough, actually, most places I've been to America are blue states. It's not intentional, just the way it's worked. I need to see more of the flyover states, as they're derisively.
Where all the airports are, man. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works.
But I've seen, and I've seen. The interesting thing about this Boston show I went on last time is I actually saw more of real America and less touristy stuff than I did in previous trips. So when I was there, I went to not 1, not 2, but 3 trivia nights. You call them. We call them pub quizzes, but trivia nights. And I really enjoyed it. And I got to hang out with local people, in bars that were not in the center of Boston. They were more out, out further out. And I saw more of real America. And it's just, there's something about the lifestyle. And look, I get that a holiday's a holiday and that real life is different. I'm not, trying to pretend otherwise. But there's something about the lifestyle which I just prefer. It's just a vibe. I know it sounds really wishy-washy and really silly. And, this isn't me trying to say you should move to America. Everyone else should move to America. This is just me saying why I would like to possibly move there one day. And as I said, if I won the lottery, I would split my time between the US and the UK. That would be what I would do 100% if money was no object. And it's just, there's something about it. It's the place where things happen. I can see why many would find it off-putting. I totally get that. The homicide rate is much higher. There's less of a safety net. I get that. But there's just something about America. And I think I'm vindicated here by the fact that so many people feel the same way. And as I said, I'm not saying to anyone who's listening out there, you should move to America. It's just why I personally would possibly like to do it one day.
It's funny too, because I've got enough UK friends over the years now that the UK's got some very distinct lines of demarcation to different areas. Even London itself has some splits in it. The Midlands are different. Yorkshire's different. The North is different. There's some real division. This thing with Burnham, we're criticizing a little bit, but no, Manchester versus London, that's a real thing. That's a thing, and not just in soccer. Like, just mentality wise, like America, people. I think one thing that took foreigners by. Let me take foreigners back, because that sounds hard. What took visitors back, because this World Cup really is like, I think you just saw over and over in the social media is they realize how vast and diverse. People do not understand the diversity of America.
Yeah. Like,
you can go anywhere in England and there's differences between Yorkshire and Portsmouth, but there's a very strong English through line. I can take you to New York City and then take you to parts of West Virginia, and you're going to wonder how that's the same country.
Yeah.
And then I can take you to the deep South and then take you to the Pacific Northwest. And you're going to be like, there's no way this is the same country.
Well, I went to Rhode Island from Boston, and it was even there. And Rhode Island's like an hour away. Even Rhode Island had its own distinct identity. And most people in the UK have never heard of Rhode Island, besides maybe from Family Guy. But even then, there was a strong, I remember having a tour of the Rhode Island state capital, and the tour guide was explaining to me, and she was saying, there was only like 3 of us on the tour, and she was saying, we basically, the revolution happened because of us. And I was like, yeah, but if I ask Boston people what they're going to say, and she said, well,
they'll tour at all the colonies, by the way, every colony will say.
Yeah, they'll say something different, but it really does feel like every state has its own story to tell, and the state identity there is so much stronger. And it feels like there's more there to see. It's more there to experience. And this is why I'd like to go to 50 states in my life. I've been to 12 so far, so I've still got a lot to go. But it's a big country. It's a huge country. People don't realize how big it is, how vast it is, how varied it is. And I can see why people are scared. And it's okay to think, not for me. That's totally fine. I totally get that. 20 years ago, I would have been like, oh, well, how can you not like America? Now I understand it's a taste thing to a large extent. Yeah. It's a taste thing. And it's just something I personally prefer. It's a great country, and, you should be proud of it.
See, I think I get my back up when people go after the diversity as our strength thing, because people with prejudices automatically go to the racial part of it, and that is part of it. But no, diversity really is America's strength, because we are one of the literally only massively diverse countries that function.
Yeah.
Like, normally, if you have a diverse country, it comes apart at the seams. Look at, the Soviets tried to do, look what the Soviets did in places like Yugoslavia. And when they tried to just look at the Middle East, for God's sakes, where they're 99%, and they'll still kill each other over 1% tribal differences over different things. Same thing in Southeast Asia. Look at Myanmar. Like, almost everywhere else in the world, if you have a lot of diversity, you have conflict. I mean, like open warfare conflict. There is no other example in history of the diversity that America has where it works and functions.
Yeah.
And people just do not stop and get over their own prejudices and go, diversity is our strength because we're the only people that's ever made it work right. Because nobody's ever been as diverse as we are. And then we're still the economically and powerful wise, the greatest country that's ever been. And those two things go together, and you can't split them, but people don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, and it's nice to go to America and meet Americans, meet people who have been there, who have roots hundreds of years, but then also meet somebody who's been there, for 10 years, and they see themselves as just as American as the guy who's been there 200 years. And it's as I said, other countries don't really have that, and it's nice to, it's just really, there's something admirable about that. There's something, as I said, America almost represents the human race in a way. It's as I said, a very imperfect representation, but you get all of humanity there.
That's very good. You need to write that down.
Yeah.
Let me be an editor for a second. That's very good. because we are one of the few diverse countries in the world, really, truly diverse countries. My children have grown up in a city where I think the racial makeup is like 42, 44, 20 something, white, black, Hispanic. Like that's. There's not very many cities in the world like that.
Yeah.
And it's not a major city, but it's just a unique environment. And they grew up, they very worldly because we lived overseas, and they had different schools, and, dad was in the military, and, they've had a little bit different lifestyle than a lot of kids. But I don't have to explain diversity to my kids. They just, if you tell them diversity is bad, they're going to look at you like you just said the world is flat. Because their lived experience is, no, it's not. This is a good thing.
Well, American diversity works so well. It really does. Right. I think it works in a way other countries, like the diversity in the UK is, to an extent, it works in a similar way, but it's just not as strong. We don't have that strong identity. I mean, there's been attempts to create a British identity, sort of an artificial one, but we just don't have the roots that you guys do. We don't have that. And it's...
How much of that, put your history hat on for a second. That's kind of the good and the bad of the Commonwealth, right? Where it's like, and I don't want to rehash colonialism, because we all know how colonialism can get evil really quick, and there was some good parts to it, but it got abused pretty badly too. So setting aside the colonial part of it, though, but when you have a Commonwealth system where it's like you're in but not up, we're all together but we're all separate, isn't that kind of just ingrained in it that you're going to have kind of trouble getting a unity out of it, even though you're calling it a Commonwealth?
Yeah, exactly.
It almost, I don't want to say it's incongruent because that's a little too far, but it's almost like it's baked into the cake of like, we really like you at this arm's distance right here.
Yeah, well, there's been a debate on Twitter about some people have been saying, like, some people like Black Britons to other Black Britons have been saying, why do you support an English team, England over DR Congo? And they've said, well, I was born in England, I was raised in England, but in America, I feel like there's less of that sort of. It's like, I'm American, of course I'm going to support America. And personally, this is what I prefer too. Like, to me, like, if you're born in England, you're English. People always often say, oh well, if it wasn't for immigration, the English football team wouldn't have these players. But I think, well, actually, they were all born and raised here, bar one who moved here when he was like 2. But he's still just as English as I am. And I don't like to see this sort of racial nationalism. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
I don't know if you saw, but Bosnia had a player that had come up through the American national team system until a couple of years ago, and now he's playing for them. And our guys were letting him know it.
Well, look at
by the end of the game, they were bringing it up.
Well, look at Michael Elise, one of the best players. Plays for Bayern Munich. He's a brilliant player, born and raised in London, but he plays for France because his mum was French, and that grates me a little bit. But what can you do? It's his choice. But he should be playing for England.
Yeah. To wrap this up, because I could just do this all day because I'm sad. I want to be on the hill for the 250th with my family, and I've had some health stuff this week, so I'm being good and behaving myself. But when you think of the future of America, especially from the English perspective and somebody who has an affinity for America and who's sitting there in a USA jersey looking ridiculous, I swear to God, I was looking for like a star-spangled something to put on, and I couldn't find anything. I'm like, man, I don't have any patriotic shirts. And then you show up in a U.S. jersey. So thanks a lot for making me look bad. My own country. I do have my Up Yonder shirt on. So from your perspective, though, when we look at the future of America, I am a very cynical person in a lot of ways. I've been trying to work on that. I've told people honestly that the last year and a half, and some of it's where I went back to community college and I've just been around some real people, but I've been around a lot of young people lately. My kids are all young adults, so I'm around young people a lot. I've been more encouraged the last year and a half, being around more young people, being in the community college environment with a lot of young people. I think the kids are all right. I think the middle-aged kids and the boomers online are giving a distorted viewpoint of where the next generation's going. I'm very encouraged at this next generation. I don't think they're scared of AI. I think they got a good handle on it. They hate the slop. They like the productivity. Like, they handle that better than we do. They don't worry about social media. They grew up with it. It's just the fish in water. They don't even think about it. I think social media and politics, because it's dominated by older people, is skewing the greatness that is coming in this next generation. I know we already talked at length about the structural problems of both of our countries. That's a real thing. You got to deal with pensions and entitlement reforms and health cares and tax. I get all that, demographics. I know there's structural problems, but me dealing with young people, I'm more encouraged now than I've been in my whole life, because I think the next generation gets it better than we do. I think they know how to use the technology tools better than we do. I think they have zero tolerance for prejudice. Zero. Like, my kids and their friends, they have no time for prejudices, racial, sexual, religious, they don't tolerate that. They're just like, no, you're dumb. I'm not wasting my time on you. They're that blunt about it. I'm encouraged about what the next generation is going. When you look forward to America and you're viewing it from your point of view, are you optimistic of this next generation coming up? I know there's problems, but I feel pretty encouraged, actually.
I haven't had as much experience with the next generation, next generation Americans as you would have done, so it's hard to say. But the fact that they've grown up in the American environment, and they're going to have this shared culture, this shared identity. Yeah, I think I don't see why. I mean, America's people have often predicted the end of America or the decline of America. People often say, "Oh, 20th century was the American century, 21st century is the Chinese century." I don't buy that at all. I think for all the issues we have now, I don't see why America can't continually reinvent itself. And I have no worries really about America. In the long term, you're a vibrant country. You've got that draw. that China especially doesn't. And I don't see any reason why you should have anything to be concerned about long term.
We beat up on the UK quite a bit today just because of, the hot mess that's going on with the politics, but there's also some good stuff going on. Give us a couple positive things in the UK for us over here, because we've been throwing some rocks. You can throw a couple back now if you want to, because we got our own hot mess election coming up and all that, but give folks a couple of the positive things going on in the UK now, because it's not all doom and gloom. There is some good stuff going on.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting country. We've got so much history. Obviously, Parliament at the centre, which I would always advocate for. But you go around the UK, people come here and they love it. Americans love coming here, and there's a reason for that. But also, as well, culturally, we punch above our weight culturally. I mean, one thing I've noticed in the last 20 years since I started my infatuation with America is that actually British culture is permeating America more than it used to, and that's probably because of social media. But
actually, the Downton Abbey. Yeah,
I mean, everything: films, TV, songs, video games. It's heartening to see. Like I've been on social media and I've seen like Americans who are into their football and baseball, American football, I should say, and they're using like memes, British football memes. And I love seeing that. I love seeing like this random American that I follow doing Harry Kane memes, and getting involved with that sort of stuff. And it's great to see that this shared language is bringing us together. And actually, American culture's come over here, but likewise, British culture's come over there as well. And it's nice to see that we can still punch above our weight in that regard.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I know in the piece that we were talking about that's linked in the comments, you had the Yeltsin picture, but so much of the fall of the Soviet Union happened culturally. When they got TV and they could see it and the music came in, and, there was a big cultural component to that time period and the change and the wall coming down. Culture had a lot to do with that. American soft power has always had an American cultural element. And English culture is, it's 1 and 1A. There's a lot of parallels there. But culture is important. And that's one of the things I've been trying to figure out a way to write about this, and I can't get my head around it. But, we went from the Pax Americana to the Repax Americana, which is, instead of Pax Peace, Repax, which is predatory. The corruption and the predatory nature, and we're not going to help your country unless we get something out of it. That's where I think's a real danger to the politics of the moment in America.
I think it's temporary.
I think it's temporary too, but it's damaging because you lose that cultural thing is something you don't want to throw away willy-nilly, because that's hard won. That's really hard won. That can't, the post-World War II good sentiments, the fact that we kept the peace in Europe by parking ourselves there for years and years and years. The American cultural influence in a positive light for the world is something we're throwing away by accident that we should not be throwing away. It really is that fence you pull up that you need to know why the fence is there before you pull it up. Just throwing away that cultural identity of America is a good thing, is a good force in the world, and throwing it away for corruption and greed I think that could be a generational sin to America if we don't get a handle on it pretty quick.
I agree, but I think most of that will come back. I think, people are quite short-termist now. In a few years' time, I think people will mostly look back at it and say, yeah, that was Trump. I mean, there's some damage done, but I think the scars will be there, but I don't think it will be a terminal thing.
I've talked to so many people, especially in Europe, also the Middle East, some of the contacts I have. India is one that's really been interesting because they've really had a rocky road with Trump, where they really thought he was going to be good for them. And then he's, the Indians, especially, they're just like, we're just going to wait it out. And I've heard it from, I've heard it from other people in Parliament, and I've heard it from you. We've had that conversation offline. Like, everybody's just going to kind of ride it out. We'll get what we get, and then we'll readjust and see who the next guy is. So it does get overblown in American media of like, we've lost our state. No, people understand our political system.
And Trump's
around, is damaging.
Trump is at Bush 2 levels, like second term Bush levels. He's very unpopular, and this is why I brought up the piece that the similarity between the last 20 years.
Yeah,
Trump's very unpopular. People can see that. We know that he's not liked in America. Americans don't like him generally.
But I think it is going to be one of those things where, look, I got a lot of scars, man. I've had a lot of surgeries, I got a lot of scars. The skin ain't ever just right after that. Like, even though it heals, I think we're giving away more than we're going to look back and go like, okay, we should regret that because we lost some stuff that's going to be really, really hard to get back for the next generation.
Yeah.
And that part worries me more than the politics or the ins or the outs or we can change economic policy. We can redo economic treaties. We can readjust defense postures and all that. The trust part's real. And it's something that's getting damaged. It's not just because of Trump, although Trump's doing it. You can't be unreliable.
Yeah.
And if we keep doing this where we elect unserious leaders, the world is rightly going to see us as an unserious people, even though we're very powerful as a country. They're going to rightfully see us as an unserious people if we don't elect serious leaders. And there's going to be validity to the accusation. And that's whether it's we can have incompetent Democrats as well as we can have incompetent Republicans. And we can have corrupt. We've had corruption in both parties. I think we need to elect serious people, or we just have to wear the hat of we are an unserious people. And I think right now we're a very unserious people because we have the prosperity to get away with it. And that's I love my country. That's where we're at. You got to look at it and be honest too.
Look, we're not electing serious people either. So we're in the same boat as you to an extent. We're not electing anyone serious.
You're going on number 7 of how do you view Cameron?
I like Cameron. I think he made some mistakes, but I think he was a serious politician.
He's going to get saddled with Brexit.
But I think that was something that needs to be dealt with. I think he should get credit for actually at least trying to deal with it because people just ignored it.
But that was the start of this. With 6, you get egg roll, as I called it in my piece, except you're not getting an egg roll. And then the 7th, and we already know who the 8th is going to be probably. So this sequence of events kind of started there with the UK. I don't think and my piece is up. You can read it at the Substack and or Ordinary Times, both. Hertel Substack. I can't plug my own stuff today because I'm not feeling well. But you can just see it coming, man. Burnham's going to have some kind of a crash out event in the first 3 to 6 months. And by this winter, when the fuel prices go up again, he's going to be toast. And then it's just a matter of how much of a chunk Reform and Restore and the Tories take out of each other to see how that election shakes out in 2020. Because you got to have one in 2027, right?
2029. 2029 it'll be. That's when it should. That's the latest it can be, but it could be earlier.
So sometime in the next 18 months, somebody's going to call a general election, give or take.
No, sometime in the next 3 years.
Yeah, it's not going to go 3 years with this kind. They're going to have to do something. So
we'll wait and see.
Yeah, somewhere in here, y'all going to have an election, and I think whoever gets in next is going to have the exact same problem, and then it's going to probably settle down.
Yeah.
And that's a rough place to be because you're sitting there going like, okay, we're just going to have old military term. You're going to have to embrace the suck for a while. And I kind of see that in American politics right now too, because you're going to have the Trump backlash election coming, right? Rightfully so. You always do. Mm-hmm. But I think that's not going to be the thing either. I think it's the election after that's going to be more telling. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you're going to have the reaction election, and then everybody's going to get past it, and then you're going to kind of decide where we're going to go after that. And then we're going to deal with Social Security being insolvent and the hard tax raises and all that coming that nobody wants to talk about. Or as my dad jokes, he goes, yeah, we got 10 more years, but I'll be dead by then, so we're good to go. I'm like, well, that's not a help because he's 80. Like that doesn't help me on multiple fronts, Dad. Don't say that. I just, maybe that's a good place to leave it. America is great. England's a wonderful place, but we're all going to have to embrace the suck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm glad I'm not in frontline politics anymore. I'm glad I just work, a bit further back from it.
I mean, you're an Aston Villa fan. You should be used to this.
Well, we're doing well now, so this is the best we've been in 30, 40 years. So
you're always good during the off season. Stop it.
Yeah, well, it was good at the end of the season. I mean, the end of the last season was the best season we've had in 40 years, 45 years. So, I mean, when it comes to Villa, I'm embracing the joy.
We cannot let England win the World Cup in America on the 250th. That's just not right.
Oh, it would be nice. It would be nice.
The FIFA dropped the ball so bad. How do you not have America playing in Philadelphia today?
Oh, well, don't get me started on FIFA. No one likes FIFA.
Well, I know they're the most incorrigibly corrupt people on the planet, but just of all the no-brainer things to do, how do you not jimmy it so that America is playing England in Philadelphia on the 4th of July? Can you imagine? That would get 1 billion people watching it easily.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking. The entire planet would watch that.
And
That
instead,
would
you've
probably be
got,
the highest rated
you've
game
got
in the history of ever.
Canada. You've got Canada playing on the 4th of July in an hour instead. How does that make you feel?
Well, I do Canadian TV. I've got to work, so I do a lot of Canadian TV, and it's really funny because it's been fun in our meetings because I get to give them heck about hockey because we built them in the World Hockey thing, and then we got the Stanley Cup, and they haven't had it since I was like 11 or whatever. And so we're better at hockey. Our red southern states are better at hockey than Canada. It's kind of the running joke right now.
Yeah,
because Vegas and Raleigh won it this year, in Carolina. So we joke with them about hockey and stuff. But my line with our Canadian friends, when I really want to tick people off in a meeting, I was like, well, that's why 93% of you live within an hour of the border, so you can be close to a real country. I love you, Canada. I'm joking, but it's just stuff like that. So yeah, Canada's fun. Our buddy Ben Harris, this has been fun, man. I appreciate you doing this. We did this a couple of years ago. We hadn't done it, and then when my travel plans got screwed up, I was like, let's run it back and have a Englishman for the 4th of July. Tell people where they can follow you. You got the Substack up now. I know you're back working in Parliament, so you're not doing a whole lot of media, so I appreciate you coming on and talking to us. But let folks know where they can find you and keep up with you until we see you again.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk to you, Andrew. And I hope you have as good 4th of July as you can.
Yeah, and I think you'd make a good West Virginian, man. If you ever actually want to immigrate, we'll get you a nice West Virginia girl to marry. We'll get it all worked out.
I want to visit West Virginia. I've heard it's very beautiful.
Yeah, my dad's people all came from Ireland. I always wondered why they settled in West Virginia, and then the first time I went to Ireland, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. They come out of New York and they're like, just see nothing but green. They're like, oh, we died and went home. Okay, now it makes sense. So, good stuff. Ben Harris, appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you, sir.
All the music on Her Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.
Somos la mente.